Well, employers had been softened up to possibly worry about employers' national insurance on pension contributions, which was one of the rumours in the run-up to the budget. What actually happened is much worse for employers in terms of additional costs. So we've got two changes to employers' national insurance. We've got an increase in the rate from 13.8% to 15%, and we've got a dropping of the threshold at which employers' national insurance becomes payable from £9,100 to £5,000. The dropping of the threshold alone is going to increase the cost of employees by £615 per employee per year. And the increase of the rate, well, to calculate that, simply multiply your wage bill by 1.2%. So for businesses, this is a huge additional cost. We do have a little bit of respite for smaller employers. The employment allowance, previously £5,000 and only available to certain employers, is now being increased to £10,500 and available to all employers. So small employers with small numbers of employees may find that they don't actually suffer any additional costs, but larger employers, this is going to be a big additional cost to them. We've got things we ought to be considering. Any employees who are not in salary sacrifice for their pension contributions, that should definitely be relooked at, because salary sacrifices, pension contributions and other benefits is one way of reducing the employer's NI burden. We're also expecting employers to consider offshoring some of their labour to actually pay people outside of the UK, so the employer's NI charge doesn't hit at all, and also a move towards looking at self-employed labour as well, and then dealing with the complexities of IR35 and related regimes that follow. So employers will need to adapt at the very minimum as this change comes in from April 2025. They need to rework their numbers, cash flows and budgets just to see what impact this has on their businesses. Well, this was the area where I think things had really got out of control with the rumours, and it really had created a frenzy of people selling assets and intergenerational transfers of wealth. So the Chancellor has already had an enormous windfall of people selling their businesses and giving assets down the generations in the run-up to the budget. But that said, we still have an increase in capital gains tax going forward, but not quite as bad as people had feared. So the 10% rate applying to basic rate taxpayers is going up to 18%, and the 20% rate for higher rate taxpayers is going up to 24%, and all of that applies from budget day, so from the 30th of October. Any transactions that happen before the 30th of October, all fine, but from today onwards, the higher rates will become payable. One surprise we had was a change to business asset disposal relief. So the business asset disposal relief regime allows business owners to pay just 10% tax on lifetime gains up to 1 million. The 1 million staying where it is, no increase there, but there is an increase to the tax rate. So the 10% rate will remain until the end of this tax year. From the 6th of April 2025, that will go to 14%. And then from the 6th of April 2026, it will settle at 18%. So we've got a couple of cliff edges there. As we reach the end of each tax year, we will see transactions being accelerated and probably a little bit of bad behaviour between purchasers and sellers trying to actually renegotiate deals at the 11th hour, knowing the tax rate is going to increase. People are going to need to just take steps now just to think about what the new CGT rate looks like in far as their personal investment strategy. It may mean that they hold assets in a different way or different assets entirely. But this is a new world we live in, not quite as bad as it could have been as far as the headline rate. Well, inheritance tax was one of the taxes that wasn't protected in the manifesto, so we were always expecting some changes. What we found was that the nil rate band, the residence nil rate band, would be frozen for even longer than we were expecting. So the freeze was due to end in 2028. That's now going to continue on for 2 years to 2030. So no respite there on the amounts in which zero inheritance tax is paid. We've got change to pensions. So from April 2027, pensions will fall within the charge to inheritance tax after being taken out back in 2015 following previous pension reform. That's going to change a lot of people's financial planning if pensions are now going to suffer inheritance tax when left to the next generation. So that needs some thought between now and 2027. The biggest change, though, I think, is around the reliefs, agricultural property relief and business property relief. These reliefs are going to continue, but only on the value of assets up to £1 million per person. So if somebody were to die owning a business that would ordinarily have been able to pass to the next generation free of inheritance tax, it's now only going to pass free of inheritance tax up to 1 million of value. After £1 million, it's going to suffer inheritance tax with a 50% discount. So the rate at the moment will be 20% inheritance tax on the value above 1 million. For AIM shares, also have benefited from business property relief. They don't benefit from the £1 million allowance. So the inheritance tax rate on AIM shares will be 20%. The market reacted well to that with a rally in the AIM market immediately on that announcement being made. Family businesses are potentially in crisis over this measure because when somebody dies owning a business, if it doesn't pass to spouse, if it's passing down a generation, we're going to have potentially very large inheritance tax liabilities without any cash being generated to pay them. That may mean that trusts are going to play a bigger part in ownership of family businesses. So we'll wait for the detail and see what family businesses ought to do to react to these measures. Well, the main impact for landlords who've suffered quite a lot of tax changes over the years was around stamp duty land tax. Now, this is a tax that needs complete reform, not just messing around with the edges. What we've got here is an increase to the very unpopular high rate for additional dwellings. So if you're a landlord and you're buying property, you pay at the moment an extra 3%. As from tomorrow, the 31st of October, that goes up to 5%. So the top rate of stamp duty is becoming 17% when a landlord's buying a property or anybody else is buying a second property. That'd be 12% plus the 5% surcharge. If you're a non-resident, that 17% becomes 19%. Now, this whole measure isn't designed particularly to raise tax. It's designed to take people out of the market. So there are a greater number of properties for homeowners and first-time buyers. Whether it works or not, time will tell. But really, given the higher rate for additional dwellings at 3%, it's already deeply unpopular. An increase is likely to bring down demand for those.